You see the kid right there. His name is Madden San Miguel. And he's gone viral. And his father, Jake, has talked about the process of getting baby Gronk to where he's at. He says, we put in 5 or 6 days a week of training. He diets, he eats clean salmon and brown rice. He's in a routine. He's a real athlete. He's not a normal kid. Normal kids are emotional. They put their head down when they make mistakes. They talk back to the coaches. They make noises, but he doesn't do that. He's been trained and programmed since he was 6 years old. I got a lot of thoughts about this. Part of it is the, pimping your child out on social media that I do not like. The other part of it is what 10-year-old needs to have 6 days a week of training. But Felder, You're a father. We've both been through this athletic process to get to college and to really further our careers. What are your thoughts on this situation?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about pimping your kid out for social media, like for likes. Like come on, man. I'm not a fan of it. Like anyone that's been on my Instagram, they've never seen my kid. You have to go to my wife's private Instagram to see my kid. Not because I don't like my kid or I'm not doing a Drake here, right? Like I'm not denying my kid. It's literally just she didn't ask for it, so this isn't a space for public people. But the other part, I mean, if we get into it, I wrote down a bunch of notes and I couldn't fit them into my doc that I have on the computer. So I am going to have to grab my notebook to look at.
Let's get into it.
But like, first and foremost, I'm thinking about this kid's health.
Yep.
There is such a thing as overtraining. Mm-hmm. So let's go through these. We're going to go through this. This is the first block. This is what we're going to do. How do you feel about overtraining?
It's a real thing. I'm big on this idea, and J.J. Watt actually had a tweet about this. Kids should play multiple sports. I'm big on it. And when I grew up, I was a football player. I also played basketball. Track and field was my first love, so I did that for 2 seasons. I did it in the spring and in the summer, and I would cross-train that with football, and I did that up until my NFL career was over. I trained on the track for football. And I believe that's huge for injury prevention. I also think it keeps you sharp as an athlete because it gives you multiple things to do. Football's a team sport. You go out and you're running track, and it's really you against yourself and against the clock or the measuring stick or whatever it is. And so for me, first off, you need breaks. And second off, you need to train your body to do different types of movements in multiple sports, or else you're going to work the same muscles over and over again, and that's where we see a lot of these injuries. And these injuries, it seems to me, have gone up. Anecdotally, you can watch them, but soccer players all sustain the same injuries. Football players, we see the same things. Basketball players. And part of the reason why is because you do it around the calendar instead of season by season doing what the different sports require you to do.
Well, it's also here. I think about Elena Delle Donne. She was the best basketball player in the country. And she got to UConn and said, I don't want to do this anymore. And then she went and played volleyball at Delaware. And then she was like, okay, I'm going to play basketball again. And obviously she's in the WNBA. It's one of those things where mentally, you can burn your kid out.
Yes,
and you can really fry them with just repetitive motion. So you can fry their body, but you can also fry their mind. And that's the part where, and listen, we're not criticizing what they want to do. We're going to get to the desire part in a second. But that's the part for me. The next thing that I wrote down was, there is a level of privilege to this, right? There's a level of I can afford private trainers, I can afford private coaching, I can afford all this for my kid, and whether it's you making sacrifices in other places, but at the end of the day, there is a level of privilege that other people don't get. And I think as football players, we see this the most with quarterback coaches, right?
No doubt. The quarterback coaches are intriguing to me, and I came from a suburban upbringing where people had the money for it, and I've seen kids out of my own high school, quarterbacks specifically, that are getting recruited. One just committed to Penn State in the class of 24, and he works with the same quarterback coach that Drew Aller, who's supposed to be the starting quarterback at Penn State, worked with. They're both Ohio kids, but you have to have access to that kind of stuff. You have to be able to get into the facilities, and you don't necessarily see it. You kind of talked about the desire aspect of it for young people, and I think a lot of times, and I'm fortunate because my dad was a good athlete through high school and wanted to continue in college and just couldn't because the privilege thing you mentioned, he had to help his family pay the bills when he went off to school. But he never looked at me and said, oh, man, I got to live through my son. So he was the dad who was in the back. He had his hands in his pockets. He wouldn't say anything to me. He wouldn't step on the coach's toes. He just kind of let the process develop in and of itself. And that gave me the space to pursue what I wanted to pursue in the way that I wanted to do it. And what was unique about this situation in terms of desire is Jake, the father, came out and said, I know it's a long shot getting to the NFL, and that's not what I expect out of my kid. The flip side of it, and the second part to the statement is the one that really bothered me. He said, so I'm going to get this money right now for him, and we're going to put it in the savings account, and we're going to try to seize the moment right now. And it's like, man, like youth sports are not supposed to be about that. Like it's not supposed to be about likes and clicks and social media and brand deals and DMing random celebrities to see if that you could cross-pollinate content on their platforms. That's wild behavior. And going back to this idea, too, of what's best for the kid if they do want to pursue this, every coach that I know in college football, maybe outside of the quarterback position, because you want those guys working on the mental game around the clock and the mechanics and everything, they like multi-sport athletes. It's rare that I've come across a coach that didn't want to see an offensive tackle that could also play basketball, didn't want to see a defensive lineman that was also a wrestler, didn't want to see wide receiver, running back, linebacker, safety, cornerback that played baseball, ran track, all of the different things that are involved here. And so even if we're talking about the trajectory of a young athlete, this whole scenario, I feel like, is bothersome to me because there are so many things that are being done wrong. And again, parents get to parent their kids. However, I do not have children of my own, so I can't cast judgment to a certain degree. But when I look at athletes and having been a coach, coaching high school track, I do know what is best for athletes a lot of times. In this situation, ain't it for me.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue for me is, I guess, let's start at the top, like baby Gronk, right? Baby Gronk. Guess what? Gronk was a guy that grew up. He have two brothers that were put together to play sports. Mm-hmm. Their family was a weightlifting family. Their family was an athletic family. That's what they did. And it worked out for him. It worked out for him. But you look at the rest of it, and Kobe Bryant, obviously the same thing. And I guess we could throw Steph Curry into the mix, but there's also Tony Mandrich, and there's also there's all these. There's Andy. You went to Ohio State. There's Andy Katzenmoyer, who, at the end of the day, he was like, I'm tired of football, dog. Like this is, I've been hurt so many times. Like this isn't gonna work out for me. And so, I just putting the pressure of your family on the shoulders of babes doesn't feel right for me. And I am a dad, and I want my kid to be involved in sports, but I've had to be and I think I have a pretty reasonable view of it. And my mom and my dad, who didn't push me into sports, my dad went out and bought me an Air Attack 2 my freshman year for baseball. He took off work to go get an Air Attack 2 bat with the nitrogen in it. He took off work to go get me that, but he never pushed me. Mm-hmm. He never said, hey, let's go throw. He said, do you want to throw?
Yes.
And there's a humongous difference between we're going to throw and do you want to throw?
Yep.
And I always wanted to throw. And my grandpa, RIP, but my grandpa got me a home plate, which I'm going to get my daughter, the home plate and a tee and the whole deal. But it was never foisted upon me. It was always an option that I had. But you know what else I did? I caught grasshoppers, I caught lizards, I caught salamanders. Yep. I went down to the river, I went down to the creek and caught crawdads. And I guess for me as a father, I don't want sports to be my kid's whole life. I want sports to be a part of her life. Although she is getting into swimming, and I can tell you this, I don't want that to be a part of her life. But at the end of the day, I do want sports to be a part of her life. And if she does develop a passion for swimming, then you know what? I'll be at every single meet. And just as you mentioned, I'm going to stand in the back. I'm not going to be the yeller. Yep. I'm not going to argue with the judge. I'm not going to argue with the ump. I'm not going to argue with those people because that's not my job. Their job is to enrich the life of this kid. And so for me, what I look at is I want to give her the tools that she needs. And she's got the tools. I spent a bunch of money on mitts, JP, a bunch of money on mitts so that we can have a family catch. But at the end of the day, it's not just what the kid wants. It's also the kid, and J.J. Watt mentioned it, letting the kid be the kid. And Stetson Bennett was like, well, what if it's the kid's desire? And if you show that desire, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to support you no matter what. That's what my job is as a parent. That's what your job is, right? As someone who's in a blended family, that's part of your job. But you don't get to kind of push them, and you certainly don't get to use them. And that's why I wanted to spend some time on this, because I feel really passionate about it. Like, my parents never pushed me. My parents actually pulled back multiple times on, like, hey, there's this, like, the AAU team or the travel team, and they're like, we're not going to everything. We're not doing it. You got summer camp where you do arts and crafts instead of playing baseball, or you got this instead of doing football. Like they pulled back, and it's, I don't know. I saw the Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl guy, and he was like, guys, it's, your kid's either going to be good or not.